as I was packing everything up, my kids kept saying, Daddy, 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 like, can we open those goldfish? Why are you giving everything to Uncle Chicken Bird? That's their nickname for Jay, Uncle Chicken Bird. So it's like, why does Uncle Chicken Bird get all this?
Well, I think my neck's still sore because I have to act like a chicken bird, which is a bird, and thus jerk my head around and pretend I'm pecking food and all this stuff. I'm feeling a little kink from the last trip.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey, what's up? It's Jason here with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show. Thanks for hanging out, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is the show to help you travel the world on your terms, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire, no matter what your situation or experience. I was so excited to get back on the mic with my good pal, Travis Sherry from Extra Pack of Peanuts. We co-hosted a podcast called Location Indie a while ago, and that was a community I was involved with for a long time, a wonderful community. And he's back. We're back on the mics together to fill you in on a recent trip we took to Bulgaria. I thought this would be fun to cover since we were fresh back from the trip, about 8 days. And Bulgaria really is an up-and-coming sort of nomad remote work hotspot. A lot of people spending some quality time in Bulgaria, great prices. I don't want to spoil too much of it because we're going to talk all about our experience in Bulgaria. Again, just an 8-day trip, but enough to kind of share some impressions with you, perhaps give you a new destination to consider visiting if you haven't done so yet. And on top of that, put a little list together of 5 reasons why group travel rocks. Now, we give a lot of love to solo travel on this show. Thought we would talk about group travel since we're fresh off of this trip. It was 19 of us together, and thought we'd share some of the highlights there and why you might want to consider a group trip on your next trip. That can be with a tour operator, of course. That can be something that you organize yourself with a large group of friends or extended friends or your network. And although that sounds overwhelming maybe to some, it really gives you some advantages, and we're going to share some of those today. So I hope you enjoy it. This was a fun one to record, and you can stick around in the back end. I'm going to share my number one tip if you're planning a big group trip, the number one thing you should do. And also, before we get into this, I do want to mention Camp Indie coming up. It's an event I was involved with last year. If you go to campindie.com, you can check it out. It's an adult summer camp, awesome speakers. I can't go this year because I have my mom visiting from America here in Norway, where I live, to see the grandkids and all that. Wish I could go, but you should go. Check it out. It's a wonderful event, and you can, of course, go on the website and read all about it there. Now, let's get into my conversation with the wonderful Travis Sherry, and I will see you on the other side. We're getting the band back together, I guess you could say, right?
The band of two. The band of two, yes. The band of brothers.
Band of two. Not band of horses, not band of brothers. The band of two. I am on the line with Travis Sherry. You may recognize his voice from such podcasts as Location Indie and Extra Pack of Peanuts. And, of course, Location Indie, we co-hosted together for a long time. And now we are back on the mics together for the first time, reunited, and it feels so good. Clearly, I'm not the singer for the band I play in here. Anyway, Trav, welcome back to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend. It's been too long.
Thank you. If it's a band of two and you're not the singer, that means I'm the singer, and I think we're in even worse shape. So we got to figure this out. Maybe it's just instrumental, but I don't play an instrument either. So
what about that harmonica I gave you?
My 5-year-old sounds as good as I do, so that should tell you everything you need to know. Yeah, we're in some trouble here if we're doing a band. We're in some trouble.
Well, we have a lot to cover today because we were just on a trip together, and we can talk about why that was extra sweet, I think, for us. To give you a sense of the type of guy Travis is and his wife Heather, who was also on the trip, they showed up with a giant bag full of American snacks. For me, I got something I didn't even know existed, which I've already hammered down, the goldfish crackers with Frank's hot red sauce. Absolutely delicious. Multiple bags
Okay,
of
good to
goldfish
know.
crackers,
Noted.
Cheez-Its, peanut butter cups, like the big cups that you can't get here. Just awesome stuff. So thank you, man. I'm still enjoying that. And we think about you guys every day. And my kids are enjoying it as well. They're just crushing snacks. So
I can't believe it's lasted this long. If that was in our house, that stuff would have been gone in the first couple days. So good on you for either hiding them from the kids or your kids having a little bit of willpower and discretion. Listen,
let's not go
like
overboard, Trav. I mean, they wanted to open every box at once. I'm like, everything will be spoiled and stale if you do that. Can't do that.
That's right. That's right. Here's the thing. Having lived abroad, for 2 years in Japan and then having traveled abroad quite often, I know how important one little thing can be when you get it from home, especially when we were living in Japan and my mom would send a care package here or there. I know how important it is to get like one jar of good peanut butter if you're in a country that doesn't have good peanut butter. And so when we were coming to Bulgaria, Heather and I realized that typically we're traveling with just carry-ons. And actually recently with some domestic trips, we've been on Spirit Airlines and Frontier. So then you're like really traveling with nothing, right? And so when I realized that we could have an actual carry-on size bag, like, a larger backpack carry-on size bag, plus a checked bag. We were bringing ski gear too, so we're not used to really bringing a ton of stuff, Jay. So, we had to pack jackets and stuff. So we were bringing a checked bag at that point. I thought, okay, well, at this point, if we're bringing one checked bag and we both get a checked bag, I'll bring a checked bag and I'll just load it up with snacks. And so, a few people put in requests. You're the one who lives in Europe. Everyone else was kind of just like, oh, I'm in Europe for a bit of time. Can you bring me this? So, man, I just loaded it up. I asked you what you wanted. Try to get you some good stuff. Extra toasty Cheez-Its are so much better in my mind than regular Cheez-Its. So, cleared out the local grocery store with kind of those snacks and brought them over, and glad you enjoyed it, man.
It was awesome, man. Thanks. And I felt a little bad. I mean, I didn't share anything with the group. I'm just like, no, these are mine. Sorry, everybody. I'm keeping these in the room.
Well, everyone else, as soon as they get back to the States, can grab that. And so when I was leaving, Jay, I didn't even tell you this. I don't think. As I was packing everything up, my kids kept saying, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy! Like, can we open those goldfish? Why are you giving everything to Uncle Chicken Bird?" That's their nickname for Jay, Uncle Chicken Bird. So it's like, why does Uncle Chicken Bird get all this? It's like, guys, we could drive the 5 minutes to the store and buy all this right now. It wasn't exactly computing to them that they could get this whenever they wanted and that you can't get it where you live in Norway. So then I just basically had to shut the suitcase, out of sight, out of mind, put it in our room. Like, all right, stop bugging me for extra toasty Cheez-Its, kids.
Well, I think my neck's still sore because I have to keep up this chicken bird persona every time you guys are FaceTiming with your kids and you turn the phone on me. I have to act like a chicken bird, which is a bird, a chicken, and thus, move my head, jerk my head around and pretend I'm pecking food and all this stuff. And, I don't know. I'm feeling a little kink from the last trip after all those FaceTimes, but what a pleasure to get to go on a ski trip to Bulgaria together. So, we have a couple different things in this episode, as you can probably tell from the title. We're doing our top 5 reasons why group travel rocks. And typically, I think on this show or in general, we're always like kind of excited about independent travel and solo travel and things like that. And those things are fantastic. We're going to give them some love, but we're going to focus on the group experience here. And we're going to start, first of all, before we get into that, we're going to start by sharing our impressions on travel in Bulgaria because, 3 years ago, just to give you the backstory, Tim Leffel, who's a friend of the show, and he's been on the show and a personal friend of ours, shout out to Tim. He, we came up with this idea of like running the ski trip, right, to Bulgaria because we're like, cheap skiing exists. We should all go on a ski trip together. Let's go somewhere where it's affordable and we can get a bunch of people to go. And then we all know what happened. So that got put off after the whole pandemic thing. And then we finally got around to doing it. And I got to give Tim a big shout out because he planned all the logistics pretty much. I'm like, do you need any help with any of this? He's like, no, I pretty much got it. I was just there. Like, you met those guys in Bonsko. They had like everything. I mean, like these one guys could like arrange everything. So he's like, I just talked to them. They arranged everything. And then he arranged everything in the next ski resort. So we went to 2 resorts. I'm like, all right, well, we'll just invite like sort of friends and, let them maybe invite some friends to kind of fill this out and some people from our communities and stuff like that. And we ended up getting 19 people, I believe, on the trip. And we all went on this group excursion together. A bunch of, I'd say, mostly independent travelers, I'd say, and couples and things like that. So I was thrilled when Trav and Heather were a last minute addition because, as I alluded to at the top of the show, it was a bit special for us because we worked together for so long on projects as business partners that we never really got to just travel and just relax and have a good time. We always, we did do that, of course, but we ended up talking about business and inevitably we get into these like mastermind sessions and big picture business things, which is fun. But Trav, it was nice to just like be on a trip with you.
It's just a different type of travel, like you mentioned, right? Like group versus solo, independent versus organized. For us, it was always around something with the business because we were traveling to do a project and or this or that, or we were traveling and then, we decided we should record all this stuff. We should do all this stuff, because we're together and we don't get a chance to be together so much. Or you were coming to the US for Camp Indy the one time. Like there was always the overtones or maybe not even just overtones, but like the in your face nature of like, all right, let's run this business together. So yeah, having the first trip where there was nothing business focused at all was really special, really fun. You and I have personally been talking about it for a while. The ski trip, you and Tim and we were all kind of chatting about that a few years ago, but you and I have talked about ever since I think 6-7 years ago, where I said like, hey, January 3rd is my birthday. One of these days I want to spend my birthday, at a beach resort surfing with you. Like we've talked about that for 7-8 years. Your birthday's mid-December. So we've always said if there was a way we could do this where we could do like a joint birthday thing and we could celebrate, surfing somewhere. We didn't do it this year, maybe one of these years, but we've always talked about just going to take a vacation somewhere and relaxing. And this was that, not to necessarily celebrate our birthdays, but it was a really cool experience. And I like how you said I was a last minute addition, which is funny because it is true. But Heather and I said we were in from the very beginning. But as is our nature at times, you said like, this is the absolute last day that you can sign up. And I was like, well, I'm coming. You're like, yeah, but you actually have to do it. Like you have to put your information in and pay the deposit and sign up. And I thought, okay, good. Well, we're making this happen.
Let me just take a moment here because this is, and then I want to talk about how we framed up this trip because that brought up something something you said brought something up in my mind I want to share. But let's take a minute to let everybody know, don't wait till the last minute to go to Camp Indy. You're putting on Camp Indy, and if you go to campindy.com, we'll link to it. It's an event that I was a part of last year. Wish I could be a part of this year. It's basically an adult summer camp thing with awesome talks and people. And I'm bringing it up because I know the position Travis is in right now, which is the one I was in last year, which has cost a lot of money to rent a venue. And so don't do what Travis and Heather did and wait till the last possible day to sign up. If you want to go to a fun, awesome summer camp for adults, get the ticket and go. It's in Connecticut. And what are the dates again, Trav?
It's June 16th through 19th. Yeah. An adult summer camp and conference.
Yeah. Don't be the last minute person. That's all I'm saying. Lock it in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I always say, guys, please don't wait till the last minute. And then I do it anyway. So I get it. But on the other side, you're thinking, can these people who said they're in just be in, please? Come on.
Take the stress off here. No, I mean, I wish I could go, but we'll hear more about what's going on there later on the show. Tim sent out a letter when he first invited everybody to this trip from his network. And he's like, hey, here's what I sent. You can take whatever you want from this. And I just loved the letter about the Bulgaria trip. And this is what I wanted to bring up, because there's something around how you frame a trip, right? And I don't remember the exact words, but it was something like this is not a work trip. Because like a lot of these people that were going were like travel content creators and, a lot of hardworking people in travel and other industries. And we're like, this is a vacation. You probably need one of those. So take this. And I think that was a really cool intention, because as it can be with entrepreneurs, sometimes you get them all together and it's just, work. And even for travel content creators, of course, you could be documenting everything, kind of in work mode. So I thought that was a good frame to kind of shut it off.
Yeah, I agree that I've been on not many group trips, but I was on one like press trip with a group I don't know, now it's probably like 6 or 7 years ago, when we went to Israel, and it was a lot of it. Whenever it was when Facebook Live first came out. I remember that was like the new thing to do. And we're on this 10-day trip in Israel, and it was incredible. But there's probably 12 of us, I think, and 11 of us were working very, very, very hard, and kind of like Facebook Living everything. Like, we'd be there in Jerusalem. They'd be like, oh, I got to get this on Facebook Live. Again, different people run businesses different ways, but I wanted to be there to experience and then do kind of what we're then do what we're doing here, like let it ruminate and then recap it when I have some time, but actually when I'm there, get to experience it. And you could guess, I was the one that was doing the least amount of work on the ground, because I feel like when I'm doing that, it's very hard for me to actually have the experience that I want to have as well. So it was really cool to, on this Bulgaria trip, do the same thing, where basically pretty unplugged, almost completely unplugged, and just getting to experience it. And I think you and Tim both set those expectations well, where it's like you could do what you want. People went back to their room and did work sometimes here and there, but for the most part, it was, hey, you're here to travel, and that is what everyone did, which made it a much better experience, I think, for everyone as well, because there's a lot more camaraderie.
Yeah, it was awesome. We should share some impressions on travel in Bulgaria. Again, we were on a ski trip there. It was 8 to 10 days, depending on, I had to come home about after 8 days. I think you were there for 10 days, something like that. So you got to do some things I didn't get to do. But yeah, I wanted to just kind of fill people in, because I thought it would be fun to talk about the visit to Bulgaria as a country, what it was like in the little time we had there. I don't know where you want to kick this off, Trav. I have some things I want to talk about, but I mean, should we kick it off with the Philly cheesesteak?
I forgot about that. That is the first thing that you and I did together when we met.
Semi-ironically.
Yeah, of
but
course.
We were
when
hungry.
we met on the streets of Sofia, we hadn't seen each other for a long time. You said you were at this one little bar. Heather and I came and met you. You had gotten in earlier than us, I guess. And you were at this bar, and then right next to this bar was a place called American Cheesesteaks, I think it was just said, or something like that. You and I, both being from Philly, were like, well, I mean, we're both kind of hungry. Let's split a Philly cheesesteak. So that's how we kicked off our Bulgaria trip. It was okay. I mean, not as bad as I could have imagined it being. Certainly not something that I would need to eat again.
I would say, so we don't lose all of our travel street cred, we did eat an authentic Bulgarian meal that night. This was just sort of a snack to tide us over, but we couldn't resist. I mean, the American cheesesteak stand in Bulgaria, two guys from Philadelphia who have been getting legit Philly cheesesteaks together. I mean, it drew us in like the Death Star draws in enemy ships, with the magnetic force. You see the word cheesesteak and you're from Philly, you're just, that magnetic force is going to pull you in. I don't know what to tell you, but they were okay. Yeah, what did you think of, well, we can start there with the capital city.
Yeah, one of the things about group travel is sometimes it can be hard if you're used to independent traveling. I know we'll get in this. It can be hard to get a sense of stuff because you don't have to do much work, right? Which is a positive, right? So, um, I went into this not having a single. Well, I shouldn't say not having a single. We had talked to our mutual friend Mikko, who's from Bulgaria. So he gave us a few places that he recommended, but I didn't have much on my radar to see and do in Sofia. And so typically, if Heather and I are going somewhere and we're only going to be in a city, and essentially all we got was like half a day on each end, right? So maybe like a little over a full day total. Typically, I'd use that and I'd run around as much as possible and try to fit everything in. With groups, usually stuff goes slower, right? Because you just have more people. So I really I liked Sophia. I don't feel like I got an incredible sense of it. I thought if we were there when all the flowers were in bloom, it seemed really lush. Like there was a lot of trees, a lot of plants, a lot of gardens, things like that. I think if we were there not in the beginning of April and end of March and more towards when stuff was blooming, I think it would be much more vibrant. But I enjoyed it. It was very walkable. It wasn't too big. Pretty fairly compact city center for all the stuff that you would do as a tourist and or someone coming through there. So it, yeah, I to me it wasn't as like picturesque as something like Ljubljana or one of these maybe European capital cities that are kind of like quintessential or postcard perfect. But I think I could spend a couple days there, and I think there's probably a lot of things if you scratch underneath the surface a bit that are really unique to Sofia.
Yeah, I mean, another part to your point, the water fountains weren't on. You know, they have these huge pools of water fountains. Like you can imagine, as you mentioned, with the flowers and the fountains going and stuff like that, it would probably give it a different vibe in those areas. But beautiful long pedestrian walkway. I love a good long pedestrian walkway. Another great reminder, when we dipped off the pedestrian walkway and went like 1 or 2 blocks over, we found that wine bar where they had the machine where you could like hold your glass up and push a button and pour different samples and stuff. It's just it's just such a great general travel rule that you oftentimes don't need to go far off of the main sort of tourist path, let's call it, to find like cute, cozy little places that are maybe a little more local. Just as a general travel, like there were some things that happened like that was just like a great reminder of, oh yeah, these are things you do when you travel. These are simple things you do to get yourself more ingratiated with the city and the locals and the community and things like that.
One of the cool things I did like about Sofia is it wasn't, because it's a bit off the beaten path, right, compared to maybe other European places. It didn't seem that geared towards tourists necessarily. Like even as you mentioned, the pedestrian walkway, walking around, not that I know who's a tourist and who's not, it seemed like we were there on I believe a Friday night or a Saturday night, I can't remember. And it seemed like that's just what the locals are out doing, right? You're yes, and maybe an American cheesesteak place, although that's probably not that geared towards tourists, to be honest. It seemed like we were just in amongst what the locals are doing on a Friday and Saturday night. Which is cool because when you're in, Paris or London or something like that, if you are in certain, or Venice or Rome, if you're in certain zones, you realize what's a tourist zone, what's not. Sofia, I'm guessing there's still that, but it's not as in your face because there's probably just less tourists coming through. I was really struck, Jay, now that you mentioned on that pedestrian walkway, the mountains. The thing that it reminded me of was Boulder, Colorado, where you used to live and where I've got to spend a lot of time with you. Is you have this long pedestrian walkway and you're just walking down it, and there's just huge mountains that you're looking at, which is not super common for a capital city of a country. So the beauty around Sofia was top notch.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you see groups of teenagers hanging around on a Friday night, it's good to see there's angsty teenagers everywhere in the world. And if they're hanging there, then it must be a place where the locals hang, right? Can be a good sign. Trav, you mentioned not doing any prep work. I mean, this is maybe a little bit tied to some of the group stuff we'll talk about, but I was just writing about this morning. Experienced travelers are the laziest travelers. So, well, I mean, when I got to Bulgaria, I realized at the last moment, I don't even know what currency they use. I'm like, do they use the euro? Do they use something else? What's the exchange rate? How much should I take out? I mean, it was like such a fail, dude. Like, I never would have done that in my early days of traveling. And then I just, by the hair of my chinny chin chin, avoided some crazy ATM fees because I happened to just sort of get lucky and decline this thing and take the bank fees instead, because it was like this weirdly phrased thing on the ATM machine. It doesn't really matter. I won't bore you with the details, but, and then when I paid for the public transportation, the first thing that happened was the lady there shortchanged me and tried to rip me off by one lev.
She
And
stole 50 cents from you. That's how your
yeah,
trip
so
started.
then I called her out on that because she did it to the person after me too, who was with us. And I realized, well, that's her scam, getting tired travel. So, you want to be on the ball when you show up. And at the very basics, this is like a practical tip that I was just saying in my newsletter today. It's like, at least know the exchange rate and what kind of currency they use, and have an idea of how, is it more of a cash society? Are they going to take cards pretty much everywhere? Do you have your hotel paid for? And just figure out like how much you're going to take out for that first thing, because it sucks making all those decisions right when you get there. And again, experienced travelers are the laziest travelers, maybe, in my opinion.
I did the exact same thing. I showed up and I said to Heather, I don't have any idea what the currency is here. Or what we should be taking out, or so exact same thing. I did something that could have had much more dire consequences on a trip just this past October. Speaking of being lazy, this Location Indie Safari was planned by our friend Scott Brills, right? Who's been on your podcast. I know he's been on mine. And again, I haven't done a ton of group or organized travel, but in the last now 6-8 months, I've done 2 big trips, right? The Bulgaria one and this trip to Tanzania. So he was taking care of everything, right? Taking care of everything, very on the ball, sending stuff out. I wasn't reading it, sending stuff out. I wasn't reading it. So I'm leaving in about 4 days. And a friend of mine's like, yeah, so do you need like a visa or anything for Tanzania? I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, do you need like a visa? Do you need to like get like certain vaccinations? Do you need to get this or that? I'm like, I don't know. I was like, if you do, I'm not going. I mean, we're talking less than a week out. I had no idea because I hadn't, again, if this was my first trip, I would have done 1,000 things. I just got super lazy. Thankfully, you didn't need a visa or vaccinations. But when I text this guy, I'm like, hey, do you need a visa or vaccinations? He's like, well, if you do, you're not coming, right? And he wouldn't even give me the answer. Like, he at least made me Google it. And I was, oh my gosh. But I mean, that's like such a basic thing that I
Right.
could have really got caught with.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing you're supposed to look at first. I mean, I have it on my checklist, I think, on the web. Like, it's, because some of these vaccinations, if you don't have them or you're new to travel, they can take months to get. You have to like stagger them. So anyway, let's not be lazy, experienced travelers next time. Okay. Deal? Deal. I'll say deal
I
for
can't.
you. He's like, no, I'm not going to promise that.
I feel if I promised it, I'd be lying. Yeah. But,
let's talk about the food. What'd you think about the food?
yeah, so I did know a little bit coming in, because having talked to our friend Mikko quite a bit and having him on the podcast talk all about Bulgaria, specifically, he talked quite a bit about food, because Eastern European food can be pretty heavy, right? If you think Eastern European food, a lot of times people are thinking meat and potatoes, right? Like that's what you're thinking, bland meat and potatoes, or a big pork knuckle or something like that, which don't get me wrong, is fine. I actually really love a big pork knuckle. But he told me that because Bulgaria, and if you can't place it on a map, I would have been hard pressed to place it on a map before we really went here. It touches Turkey and it touches Greece, right? So it's much, he was telling us, it's much more of a Mediterranean influenced Eastern European diet. So lighter, more salads, things like that. So going in, I kind of had some expectations on the food more than really anything else. And I thought it was good. I was not really wowed by the food in the way I thought it would be, because he had talked about it a certain way, maybe a little more Mediterranean. And by that, I guess I'm not sure what I mean by that. Maybe just a little lighter, or maybe a little more. I guess I thought there'd be like, maybe it'd be more similar to Turkish food, where there'd be a bit more of a, like, Turkish Israeli food, like super flavorful. Um, I thought it was decent. I thought the produce and the vegetables were very, very fresh and really, really good. But you know me, Jay, I like to rate stuff. If I'm rating Bulgarian food on a scale of 0 to 10, I'm putting it right in the middle. I'm like, yeah, I had some really good stuff, and I had some stuff that was just okay.
Really? Okay. I mean, I would rate it higher. I really enjoyed it. The Mahanas or the Mehanas, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, the traditional restaurants where they come with sort of, well, it's great because we were in a big group, right? So they come with these family style things, and you just like, you're seeing just so much meat and like vegetables. And what I loved about it was that it all, at least on the surface, I mean, I think it felt very local. Like, it's like the whole farm to table kind of thing. It's not like, oh, this is trendy farm to table. And they're not saying it's farm to table. It's just that that's how the society works. There's a lot of farms around there. And it feels like they're just sourcing the stuff from the local farms in the area, which I love. It just felt very fresh in that way. I liked the decor in these places when you go in, and there's just like all this. It takes a certain type of artist, I think, to, there's like minimalist style, and then there's the, hey, I'm going to just like fill this place with decor, and it's going to be so much stuff, but it's not going to look sloppy. It's going to look super cool. And that's like,
are you talking about the thousands of knives on the roof of the one restaurant we went to? Yeah, I mean,
it was like knives stuck in the wall, and like, racks of wine and Bulgarian wine, and traditional costumes hanging on the wall, and all kinds of different things. And it's really easy to screw that up. I feel like you can't just put random stuff on the wall, but then you look around, you're like, this place is covered and filled with all kinds of traditional stuff. But it feels cool. It doesn't feel sloppy. It just feels super nice, I guess. Cozy. There was like a fire going. So I really dug the vibe there. The people, it was hard to really connect with. And this maybe goes into the group travel thing. When you're traveling in a group, and we can, maybe this would be one of the cons, I would say. I'm sure we would get into this, but we might as well address it since we're here, is that of course you can break off and meet locals and kind of connect with them. But I would just say we had a short trip too, but in general, I'd say you're much more likely to have like some crazy experience with a local if you're traveling solo or independently, even as a couple, than you would as a group. That's not to say it can't happen. It just maybe, the comfort of the group maybe adds a layer of, you're just kind of hanging out with each other, and then you're not closed off, because you're not trying to be closed off, but just inherently being a part of a group, you're just kind of part of that group, and you're interacting, of course, with locals, and you're hanging out, but you might not get that invite to the local house for dinner or something like that.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm going to backtrack my food thing really quick. I'll bump it a little bit for three reasons that I forgot about, and then we can move off food. But I think you're right that everything is super fresh, right? Like nothing's called organic or farm to table because it doesn't have to be, because it just is, right? Like there's just a certain way of doing stuff. And I found that throughout Eastern Europe, right? They're not shipping stuff in. It's like, what do we have? We have this. Okay,
right.
Here we go.
We have a potato farm down the street. Okay, there's your potatoes. We have a,
So that's a big benefit. The other big benefit is that it was super affordable. So the quality of the food that we were getting and the freshness of the food was, that ratio was awesome for the price we were paying, right? And then I would also say there was the one thing that I really, really loved there, and have never had anything as good as there, is the nuts. So there was like all these nut vendors, right? Like cashews and like any type of nut you could ever imagine. And the nuts were really, really good. I don't know why. Haven't dug into why the nuts are very, very awesome in Bulgaria, but they were really good. So I think the type of food wasn't necessarily my favorite type of food. Like I would eat that every single day, but the quality, the freshness for the price was pretty hard to. It's going to be hard to beat that. Um, and then as far as the people, as you mentioned, Jay, I think yes, being in a group was just a completely different experience, as we'll get into now. I did find the people to be everyone was nice, but you I think most people would say this about Bulgaria and or Eastern Europe in general. This is one of the, I would say, stereotypes, but a usually a true stereotype is that they're going to be a bit more closed off in the beginning. Like you're not getting your gregarious Italian guys, chatting you up and yelling you in the street and like all of that kind of stuff.
Well, you got
right?
yelled out in the street, didn't you?
Well, that actually, yes, I did. That was the one negative experience I had was, I guess the guy was drunk. I don't know. You know how there's people standing outside of restaurants that try to get you to come in, and those are supposed to be the gregarious, like, hey, come on into our restaurant. My wife makes this food. Bring your friends. Like that's their job, is to be gregarious and to get your attention and to get you into a restaurant. This guy was the exact opposite of this. I walked by him 2 times in a 45-minute span because Heather and I were out for a walk. And he was standing outside of a restaurant as if he was supposed to be that person trying to get me into the restaurant. And he asked me if I wanted to come into the restaurant. Both times I said no. And then he got in my face and basically started cursing me out. And so like the first time I kind of, no big deal, walked away. He was just kind of yelling at me. The second time we walked by again, I don't know if he remembered it was me or not. I obviously remembered him. It was outside. Bonsko is a very small area. So like it was right outside the same restaurant. And we were actually FaceTiming our kids walking by. He asked me if I wanted to come in. I said, no, we're going to this restaurant. And then he like got up in my face as if he was going to hit me. And he's like, yeah, go back home. Like, yeah, I don't know, he was just yelling at me. But that was some random drunk dude, Jay. But yeah, I just would say they're a little more closed off, a little more reserved, a little more kind of just like letting you do your thing, right? Like that was the impression that I had. And while I certainly met some people who were nicer, even in the hotel that we were at Borovitz, the second place that we went, like I kept smiling at the person at the front desk, and she never once smiled back in 4 days. Not once. She wasn't mean. She just didn't feel like she needed to smile back.
Actually, she pulled me aside and she says, tell that Travis guy to stop smiling at me. I didn't forget to tell you that. No, I'm kidding.
She gave one of the people in our group, Kelly, when Kelly was saying bye, like we were all getting ready to leave. This is the last day. Kelly said bye to her, and she said, bye, thanks for coming, or something like that. That was really nice. And Kelly looked at me because all of us had gotten the same, I think, unless she was super nice to you, Jay, the same vibe of just like, hey, I'm here to help, but I'm not really going to engage if I don't need to. And Kelly looked at me, and I looked at her. She goes, it only took 4 days for her to say a word to me. And I thought, all right, I'm not the only one having this experience.
Yeah. There you go. What did you think about the skiing? I mean, let's talk about the mountain culture, because for anybody listening and maybe considering visiting, obviously we've got all the mountain lifestyle stuff, right? So you have the skiing, the snowboarding, but then you also have hiking in the summer and things like that. We can only talk from the skiing perspective, but when you see some beautiful mountains, surely there's some great hiking in there, and we heard there was as well. We went to 2 resorts. We went to the resort in Bonsko, which is an up-and-coming, I'd say, digital nomad hotspot in some ways. And then we went to Borovets, which is like an old communist, like Soviet Union style resort or something, which was kind of a really funky small town and super interesting. I don't know. When I think about living in Colorado, sometimes those two things merge, Trav. It's like you have the experience on the resort of like what the actual skiing is like. And you could helicopter to any resort and be on a ski mountain and kind of like base a rating or something, or just like a feeling on the mountain, the terrain, the lifts, whatever. But then there's more of this sort of, I guess say like Colorado's a great example of where like, it's like the mountain town is part, they go together. It's like the resort, but then the mountain town experience and the vibe there and everything like that. Bonsko had a bit of that vibe where it was, hey, this is like a mountain town, but I'm not sure, it was cool because you walk around and you still see locals, and like almost like old school kind of outfits, like sitting in their back porch talking, like clearly like you're like, these people have probably never been skiing on this mountain, so it's like this town in some ways is still just a small Bulgarian town. It's not filled with like, outdoor enthusiasts or whatever. So in that way, it wasn't necessarily like a mountain town, but in some ways it was when you start bringing in the ski culture and the snowboard culture. And then you have, sort of the pedestrian only area, which was really nice leading up to the resort. And they have this huge gondola that they brought in that I forget when it was installed, but I guess once that got installed.
2005, I believe.
Okay.
Or 2005, our guy, 2004.
We did a walking tour, and which I always love walking tours, but that guy said that changed everything, right? Because it gave town access to it just became a really great base for that. And then we went to like a hot springs outside of town, which was super dope. So anyway, yeah, like I know I'm kind of throwing a lot of stuff at you, but I'm curious on your impressions of like we could say like skiing, like the skiing itself, and then we could say like the town and maybe ski sort of outdoor town culture.
Yeah, starting with the skiing, we went at very end of season. So I think I think both the skiing and the ski town experience would be a lot different if we were there in peak season. I think for better and or worse, it would have been a lot more crowded, but a lot more of the mountain would have been open. Now, Jay, you do know that the day we left, well, you left a couple days beforehand. The day after we left, they got dumped with 2.5 feet of snow.
So, really? Oh,
yes.
Man.
So
that resort was barely open.
It was barely open. So like, yeah, it was for being the end of season. It was, I would say that both Bonsko and Borovitz were cool. I am a much less experienced skier than you. I've skied out in Colorado with you a decent amount, but that's kind of my only real basis. I'd never skied in Europe before. So I would say the skiing was good. I mean, as for someone who's an intermediate, it was pretty awesome for me, right? Because there's some stuff that I could challenge myself on. It was big enough, even though probably about 50% of the mountain was open, 50% was closed at both resorts, right? So if the rest of the mountain was open, I think it would be a really cool experience because you'd have more runs and more ability to kind of like go wider, right? Whereas here, kind of like how most mountains are when you get to the end of the season, kind of like a one part is open, right? And then the stuff on the periphery is closed. So, you end up doing a lot of the same stuff. But I mean, as far as the price for what you get, and this is why Bonsko and Borovitz and Bulgaria as a whole is at the top of every list when it comes to best bang for your buck ski resorts in the world, because yeah, for a $20 or $25 lift ticket, I mean, you're not going to find that anywhere else in the world, really, right?
Great deal. So, great deal.
Incredible deal. Pretty good mountain. I asked my buddy who skis all over the world because, again, I don't know a ton about skiing, and I got pretty obsessed with the ski town thing after we came back. So I was like, oh, I want to do a season in a ski town. I want to do a month, 2 months, 3 months in a ski town and just keep going day after day after day after day to get better. And so I was asking him what he would compare Bulgaria to, because he obviously has been there. The dude's been everywhere. And he said essentially that he would say it was comparable, and this is if you've been in the US, to like some of your best East Coast resorts. He's like, the mountains are bigger in Bulgaria than the East Coast resorts, but the terrain is probably a bit better at the top-notch East Coast resorts in Vermont and New Hampshire and stuff like that. So he'd be like, I'd put it like just a tiny tier below some of those best East Coast resorts. So that gives people a little bit of a framework to work on, maybe, if you have been skiing or snowboarding. I thought it was great. I mean, we didn't have to wait in any lift lines ever. You just go down the mountain, you hop on. And again, that might be because we're end of season. I did hear that in Bonsko, the gondola gets pretty packed if you're there like at peak times, and can be like an hour wait, because the ride itself, like the ride in the gondola is 25 minutes to get you to where you need to go. So it's a long gondola ride. So I could see why that could be a pain if you got there and you're ready to go on the mountain and you wait an hour to get on the gondola and then you go a half hour or 25 minutes on it. That I could see becoming a bit of a pain. But Borovitz seemed like you wouldn't wait near like as much because you're right there. Is everything is almost ski in, ski out. Like the town is at the base of the mountain and you just get on the lift and you go up. So that's a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, bang for your buck, just because you brought that up. I mean, to give people a little bit of a context here, we put this trip together not to make money, just to bring a bunch of people together. So we didn't try to add any money on top of what it costs to like be there and do the whole thing. But we were able to, stay in a hotel for a couple nights in Sofia. We were able to rent like a whole chalet that was awesome in Bonsko, where they brought in like dinner every night. Like most of the meals were covered and all the breakfast and everything, plus all the ski rental gear, like all the ski lifts and the rental gear for, 4 total days of skiing, right? 2 in each resort. We had like a transportation to the other resort and like a monastery visit, which we'll talk about, and, a bunch of meals and all this stuff. And it was 1,000 euros for 10 days.
No, less. I think it was 700.
Did we charge less?
750, I think.
Was it?
It was. I didn't pay 1,000.
You owe us some money then.
Maybe I just paid what was on the website, man. It got auto billed. I think it was 800.
It was.
All right.
It was crazy cheap.
Totally.
Like 1,000 or less. I can't remember the exact cost. But if you think about that, and I mean, as somebody so astutely pointed out during the trip, that a 1-day lift ticket at Vail now costs, well, I could look it up to get the exact price.
$250.
Yeah, there you go. So, I mean, yeah, good skiing. I felt some of that culture when you stop at the lodges, and then when you come off, there was like the après ski thing. Too many, apparently Brits, of course, found this place. They're everywhere. So there were plenty of young British folks getting their drink on. That was part of the scene, I guess. But other than that, I didn't see like another big international group there. But again, that we weren't there at high season. I liked the time of year we were there. You could get lucky, of course. The weather was pretty good. The skiing was decent, but there wasn't a ton of snow. But this was an off season for Europe in terms of skiing. But like you said, it snowed 2 feet the next day. So, I mean, spring skiing is always hit or miss. And in my opinion, it's a gamble worth taking, because the downside is that, okay, maybe less trails are open. Maybe the snow isn't as good, but it's the end of the season anyway, and you get sort of maybe a little bit nicer weather, and it's kind of like chill. Let's ski a bit. Let's have some meals, whatever. Or you could get dumped on and have powder skiing the whole time. And either way, you kind of win,
What did you think of the, and then we'll get in the ski town part, but what did you personally think of the skiing? Because you've done quite a bit more skiing than me in a lot more places.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I mean, I'm no expert. I'm not like going to go, I got to get off piste and like go through these, crazy forests and stuff like that. So it's hard to say, because there were some parts of the mountain that were closed, so we couldn't get everything. I do wish they had more like mogul trails, I guess. Not that I need like a super steep big mogul trail, but it's nice to have some bumps on some, medium to steeper type of trails. So it wasn't like super varied in the terrain, but it was enjoyable, I would say. So wasn't the best resort I've ever been to, but again, I'm spoiled having lived in Colorado for so long and having some epic ski experiences. But I guess what your friend said, being kind of equating it as a tier below those Killingtons and Stows and places like that, that's probably about right. It's like bigger than like the Poconos or the small ones, maybe not as big as
totally.
the Vermont ones. Yeah. So I mean, that part of it too, like just to give people a sense, the worst is when you wait like an hour to get on a chairlift and then the ride's like 5 minutes down. It's not like that. Like you take a chairlift up and you have a decent ride down the mountain.
Yeah, the mountains
get some longer ones.
Are pretty long. Like, yeah, that's what I enjoyed, right? Is it not everything was open like the whole width of the mountain, but almost, well, we didn't even get top to bottom at Bonsko because like we said, there was no snow at the gondola, but you can take a long route. I mean, if you went top to bottom, that is a super long run if the whole thing was open. And they told us like 2 weeks before it was, and then after they got all that powder, it would have been open too. So yeah, I would go back. I personally enjoyed it. I would do a ski season there. That's one of the things that I've been thinking about quite a bit with the ski town vibe, as well as I want to do a month or 2 months. And one of our friends, Ray, who was on the trip, same thing, was like, I want to teach my son to ski. And I'm like, I want to teach my kids to ski. So doing one in Bulgaria in a place that is very easy to get to the mountain, I think for me, and especially with the kids, if we were going to do that, it comes down to how easy is it to get on and off the mountain, and how close can we be to it, because you don't want to load up the car and drive 20, 25 minutes. It just becomes a whole slog. If I'm going to do a ski season, I've always said to you, what I want to do is something that's ski in, ski out, or very close to it, because that's the beauty. Hey, let's go ski for a couple hours and then come back. Or, some people can go and other people don't have to go. You're not making a whole mission of it every time. And, yeah, I think Bonsko and Borovitz too, is great for that. Bonsko, as you mentioned, much more of a town, almost like a tale of two towns, right? You have the UNESCO World Heritage Site, that's the old town, that's like any kind of old school European town with its own charm and not crazy touristed. So you do see people sitting there, as you mentioned, Jay, living regular life that have lived there forever, and you kind of get that feeling of it. And then when the gondola opened, up at the mountainside, they opened up basically everything, like the new town that wasn't there before 2005. And that's typically really rammed during the, I did a lot of real estate research and talked to a bunch of people there. That's really rammed during the ski season, and then essentially shuts down until summer, when people come back and are hiking and renting four-wheelers and ATVs and all that kind of stuff, and going up the mountain that way, and mountain biking. So it's an interesting ski town in that when it is a ski town, it's a ski town up on the top part, and the rest is just living its regular life. And then it kind of ends, and then everyone lives their regular life in Bonsko, and then it kind of comes back during the summer, So I liked that vibe. I think there could, ideally, as you said, an up and coming digital nomad hub. I think there could be a bit more for digital nomads or expat families if you were coming for a longer time. I think with a few more good restaurants and coffee shops, I'm just talking about what I would want personally. I think it could get a bit small. If I was there for 3 months, I think it would get a bit small, because it's only a town of 10,000 people, and there's only a few kind of things catering towards travelers, tourists, expats, and digital nomads. So if there was twice as much of that, so like maybe 4 coffee shops instead of 2, I think that would make, those are the little things that make a big difference if you're there for a long time. And Borovitz, I loved as an old Soviet kind of ski town, everything right there on the mountain, packed in, super goofy, super fun, but it's not a town, right? The town is what, 7 miles or 7 kilometers away of Samokov. So you can't, I would never live in Borovitz outside of ski season, or maybe even in ski season. There's just nothing to do other than skiing, right? It's like you just go ski, and then there's just a few restaurants ringing the bottom, and that's,
well, I mean, there is one thing to do, two things. Go to a shooting range in a hotel.
It's true.
Which was awesome, run by Bulgarian's world champion shooter. He had like a whole shooting range set up in, like, I wouldn't even call it a conference room. It was like a
smaller than a conference room.
That said shooting gallery.
Yes. We should clarify. A pellet, like you were shooting little pellets at a target, yes. Right? But yeah. What was he? The I don't know, 1986 European
68 and like 86 or something.
10-meter
like
champion or something.
Yeah, he was some kind of world champion shooter, and very interesting. And by the way, everywhere you went, there was like music videos playing on TV. So it was funny while I was shooting this gun at this target, this pellet gun. I just remember listening to like U2 or something, some older music they were playing. They played "Come On Irene." I was like, oh, I was waiting for this one while I was shooting. I
A
always
lot
shoot
of
too.
80s and 90s music videos everywhere.
I always,
in
whenever I
Bulgaria.
go to a shooting gallery in a hotel in Borovitz, I always like to do it with 80s videos in the background. Always, 100% of the time.
Always.
And
If they
we're
don't
gonna get
have
into
it
this.
on, go to the next shooting gallery. If they
Yeah.
won't play 80s music videos, find the next shooting gallery.
And we did go to a spa for $15, and that was
Yep.
awesome because they had like a steam room and saunas, and we had to pay extra for the hot tub, but it wasn't much. And swimming, we couldn't swim underwater without holding our breath, the whole time. None of us could do it. It was that long of a pool, just to give you a sense. Or we just all stink at holding our breath. But it was like a nice, legit spa type of thing, and it was $15. So that was sweet. So, there's things to do like that, but to your point, I don't think it's a town I would want to live in. Before we get in the list, I did want to touch on one more highlight for me, the Rila Monastery located in the southwestern Rila Mountains, which is a spectacular monastery that's been around, I guess. It was established in like 927. I'm looking at it. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And rightfully so. I mean, you walk in and it's just spectacular with the mountain backdrop and really incredible frescoes painted on like the walls and underneath. And when you go inside, you can't take pictures there, but it's just lovely. I mean, really beautiful, spiritual feeling place. Just one of those things where it's like you go to Bulgaria, I'd say you have to go see this.
Yeah, I would agree. Rila Monastery was awesome. Off the beaten path a bit. Well worth the trip to get there, right? However you get there, shuttle van. It's one of the main tourist attractions in that area, so that you can easily get there through any type of tour operator or anything like that. One thing that you didn't get to do that I wanted to highlight as well, in Sofia, there's a thing called the Red Flat, and I found this fascinating. Yeah, yes. I found this fascinating because, one, having grown up in the States in the 80s and 90s, communism, it's just, for me, I am so intrigued by what it would have been like what my counterpart would have been like if I had grown up, right, behind the Iron Curtain, right? It's just, it will just be something that seems so different and so unique. Like, it's kind of this big thing we've built up in our mind, right? Having grown up in the States or Western Europe even. And the Red Apartment does a really incredible job showcasing what it would have been like to grow up there. So what this group has done, it's really neat, is they've taken an apartment and they have, it's a completely immersive experience. So like you get a ticket and you go into this apartment and it's like it's a kitchen and living room, a kitchen, a living room, a bedroom, and then like a bathroom and a little balcony. So you go into this apartment and it's set up as if, I can't remember the exact year they were doing it, like right before the fall of communism. So call it like the 89 or something like that, right? Like late 80s. And they have all this stuff that you can touch everything, you can see everything. And I never actually got to ask them. It tells a story. You actually use one of those like audio tours. And there's about 40 different stories that they tell. And it's taking you through the life of this family. A mom, a dad, and a son, I believe it was. And as they're telling you, you can walk around this apartment. You can touch stuff. You can see it. You can sit there. Like, I laid on the one bed. I actually kind of dozed off a little bit. It's about an hour and a half, so I was a little tired. But they tell you, like, touch everything, go through everything. So it was really cool because, and what I should mention is you're actually in this apartment building where other people are living. So they have bought or rented this apartment and kept it as a time capsule, but other people are living in these other apartments, maybe as they were in the 80s, but probably renovated a little bit. It just it's just such a cool thing. Like, I wish every city or every place I went to had that, especially during that time period. Because me being born in 1983, I'm sitting there saying, man, I would have been 6 or 7 or 8. I could feel myself like if I was sitting in this apartment, this is how I would have grown up. And so they did a great job telling the story. And again, I don't know if it is the true story of the family who lived there before, or if it's a fictionalized version, but it's very true to what it would have been. It was great. It was, could not recommend it enough for anyone who's going through Sofia.
Yeah, that was, I put that on the list because I wanted to ask you about that. And that was the one thing when I saw I was back home and you guys were still there and you were going to that, I was very jealous because I was like, oh man, that just seems like cool just to take a look at everyday life in communist Bulgaria by going into this home of an average family, I guess.
Yep. Right across, right around the corner from the cheesesteak place.
Oh, man, we were so close. We were wasting our time shoving Bulgarian American cheesesteaks down our gullets. Okay. We should get into this list. It's a quick one. 5 reasons why group travel rocks. I think I wanted to do this too, Trav, because we're always hyping up solo travel, independent travel here. But, I think even the most hardcore solo or independent traveler has had some good group experiences, even if not for a whole trip, at least for, a group experience, like say a walking tour, which we did or something like that. But even like a group experience where you're with the group the whole time. I've led them as a tour guide. I've been a part of them as a traveler. There are, I think, some exciting perks when it's done right. I think we did it right with giving people like sort of flexibility. Of course, we're going into the assumption that, this is kind of set up for success. You're not going to be going with like on a group trip where it's just like maybe, like go, one thing after the next, like type of thing wouldn't be my style. I think at this point, most professional tour operators are able to kind of toe that line between independence, giving people freedom and flexibility, and also the group dynamic and kind of cultivating the culture there, which it's interesting because it is its own culture too. It's its own subculture within a group, within a trip itself, right? Like the group and the group dynamic and how it comes together is a part of a trip, for better or worse, I guess you could say. And that is an unpredictable part of group travel that you just don't know. You don't know. The operator, the leader's guy, I think is job. One of their jobs is to help the group gel, or at least give them the opportunity to gel to a certain extent. And, that wasn't hard with this group because it's just such a great group of people and everybody just kind of pretty laid back travelers and kind of used to doing it on their own too. So it wasn't, let's say a high maintenance type of group clientele, but there are benefits and I'd say cons to group travel. And we just wanted to, we've discussed some of the cons already, but we wanted to really highlight some of the benefits. And let's start with number 5 and count it down. Not necessarily this is in any order, but it builds a little more tension, right, Trav?
The tension of what's number 1, even though it's not the most important. We just told you it doesn't matter the order.
Well, but, I mean, I kind of have it as the most important, but it's hard to say that it's when you're talking about people and then logistics, it is 2 different things in many ways, right?
Sure.
But I would say the top one is people related. So
sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that like you said, we talk a lot about independent travel on our podcast because that's what you and I have done the most of, for sure. But I always think there's a time and a place for every type of travel. There's sometimes people will say, oh, travel, you must hate cruises because, it's just like a cruise or an all-inclusive. Like, well, no, I've never actually been on a cruise, like a good cruise. And I'll take an all-inclusive any day of the week, right? So I think group travel versus independent travel, or like I'd say group travel versus solo travel, right? Or independent travel versus organized travel, right? Those are kind of the dynamics we're looking at because this was a organized group trip, right? You could go on an organized, well, I guess you wouldn't go on an organized solo trip exactly. That might be weird. But yeah, I think one of the big benefits, and I've done 2 of these now, like I said, in the last 8 months, the trip to Tanzania and the safari, and then this one, I think for me, the biggest benefits is it's less overwhelming and you have like opportunities to branch out in a predictable way. So like when I'm by myself, or even when I'm just with Heather and we have all this time, like we could do anything, right? And so sometimes I feel that pull to do everything, or I kind of get a little of that analysis paralysis, like, oh my gosh, we can do anything. Like, what should we do? And I feel like there are times where I'm researching too much and I need to do everything has to be perfect. Oh my gosh, like the decision is on me, or if you're and you feel like you have to do it right. Here it's kind of like, hey, this group's doing this group's doing that, this group's doing that, and you're just like, I'm just going to pick the one that feels best right now. Oh, do I want to go out to the karaoke bar or not?
Less is more in some ways, right?
Less is more. And a really good example of this was, we were skiing. Heather, my wife, and I were skiing, and she was like, all right, I'm going to go sit at the lodge, right? So like we pull up to the lodge and you guys are sitting there, and she's like, I'm a little tired, I'm going to hang out here. And then some of your group was like, well, I'm ready to ski again. So I wanted to keep skiing. So then instead of going by myself, which I would have done if I was just by myself, I was like, cool. Now there's like 3 other people I haven't skied with today. We get to go skiing. I'm not sitting there saying, oh, I wonder if Heather's bored at the lodge. Should I go back? How's she feeling? Because like she's got 3 or 4 other people there to hang out with. So it just allows these opportunities to kind of just pick and choose in the moment and not feel like, like I have to think about everything ahead of time sometimes.
Yes. Yeah, very cool. All right, I like that. We're starting there with number 5, and we'll move to number 4, which may be loosely related, but I'd say is different, and that is relaxation. You can actually not pay attention for once. Like, you don't have to figure everything out all the time when you're solo traveling or you're with a couple, you're independent traveling. You do have to figure everything out. It's like, where, all right, where's the bus station? How do we do this? What do we do? Where do we stay now? Da, 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 da. And it's just like, it can be tiring. And sometimes it's nice to not have to figure out all of the logistics by yourself all the time. It's like, okay, there's a group walking tour. That's something I would have done as an independent traveler anyway. It's just that's a good example, I guess, because I love walking tours. But then I would have had to like look one up and like contact the company and book it and all that. And Tim did all that in this case, but it's like, hey, there's a walking tour. If you want to go on it, it's at 3:00. Meet over here. It's like done and done. So that's very relaxing, especially when you're just gone for a short period of time and you're just like, hey, I don't want to like have to figure all this. Like I love the challenge of figuring stuff out and solo traveling and all that. Like, don't get me wrong. I especially see the value. There's a ton of value in it, but especially on like longer trips, right? But maybe for something shorter, this is something worth considering. And tying it back to what you just said, for number 5, less overwhelming at the time and a place for different types of travel. I love that. It's like, there are seasons or whatever. And I remember you and I did a project together and we met up in Mallorca in Spain and we did like an all-inclusive. And I think it was like the first one we'd ever done. Both
it was a family resort. Like that's what they
called
it.
It was a first like family
inclusive,
a family resort.
Family resort.
Like,
yep.
Oh, this is going to be horrible. And it turns out it was awesome because, well, for many reasons, again, time and a place. We had like 2-year-olds at the time. It's like, they don't like a certain food. So you show up at the buffet, let them have whatever they want. You don't have to like think about what am I going to order, this and that. You can still explore. We got a car. We like went around Mallorca and explored. We went to the beach. It's not like we weren't those people that just didn't leave the resort. That's lame. Like I'm going to be here and I'm never going to leave. We did go out and have meals and do things like that, but you had this sort of built-in thing for kids and stuff. And again, that's a real time and place thing. Like small kids, okay, we have like some days in a place. This isn't a bad option. I haven't done it since, but I would do it again because it was just so darn convenient. So anyway, and that goes back to relaxing. Again, sometimes it's getting out of your comfort zone, getting challenged is good. But occasionally you just want to relax and not think too much.
It's nice to have the word you just used. I don't know if you used it, but the word that came to my mind is it's nice to have like a base level of decisions made for you. Okay, dinner's at this time and the walking tours at this time and this and that. And then when you have kind of your, let's say like your basics met, right? Like, okay, here's how we're getting to this resort, and then here's the day we're leaving, here are when the meals are, here's this. It's cool because then you could say, all right, well, do I want to go on the walking tour or not? Do I want to go ski longer today or not? You're making 1/5 of the decisions. And that's kind of nice because, as you said, it can get very, very, very tiring to have to make all the decisions. I remember in this Bulgaria trip, we were leaving Sofia and we were going to get on the bus to Bansko. And, again, Tim was just like, meet at this time in the lobby. I think it was like 8 a.m., right? Okay, fine. So everyone meets, everyone starts going. I had to wait for something. So you guys went all ahead and there was like 4 of us behind. And even just then figuring our way to the bus station, it was not very far, but we had to like go down a set of steps and then there's like 2 paths to take. And I remember all of a sudden saying, oh my gosh, I don't know which path to take, and just that
I was there. Yeah, we weren't sure which way to go.
Yeah, just that moment
turned
of like,
it off.
Oh wait, what? We got to figure this out. It was like enough to think, I'm really glad I don't have to figure most of this out.
Yeah, totally. It's nice. You could say it just from a travel argument too. Maybe having a bunch of decisions already made for you opens you up to having the time to explore your curiosity about the culture and things like that, because you're not trying to figure out the logistics. Who knows? I don't know. Could be something to think about. Again, this isn't an argument for like you should only group travel. I think everybody gets that. We're just trying to highlight some of the benefits of it. Number 3, I would say is very people oriented. Of course, this could be number 1, depending on your experience and who you meet. New friendships. And as you pointed out, we were talking a little bit about this list before the show. This idea of sort of random pairings, you might say odd pairings in some places, depending on the group, where you might be interacting, and this is always travel, right? And then that can happen within the group travel dynamic as well, as you might be associating, interacting with, or becoming friends with, or maybe falling in love with, who knows, whoever's listening, with somebody that you meet from the group you're with that you never would have met in any other circumstance, perhaps, right? Or like maybe you wouldn't have spent this much time talking to, I'm using air quotes, that type of person. Perhaps that's another way to, travel's about connection. And I think the more connections we have, the more we realize we're all in this together here on planet Earth. Not to get too trippy here, but that vibe translates to the group dynamic as well.
Yeah, one of the things that I loved about this trip, and I loved about the trip that we took to Tanzania, and I keep referencing that just because of 2 group trips that I took in the last 8 months, and I haven't done many of them, is that there was no the only common thing was that like this is for people who want to come and they want to travel and they want to do this travel experience. There was no age limit set on it. Sometimes group trips can say, hey, this is for retirees. Actually, our friend Scott, his dad goes on all these retiree ones, and then his dad always brings him, and he's like, I'm 30 years younger than everyone on this trip. So I guess it's not like just for retirees, but it's like almost everyone does that. Or like Kentucky tours or something like that, where they set an age limit. Those are done for certain reasons, and they fill a certain spot in the travel ecosystem. What I've liked about the trips that we've done is that there is no requirements for age or where you're from or anything like that. And so it has spanned a wide swath of ages and experiences. Some people are retired, some people are younger than me, some people are older than me. And so that's been really neat, especially on this last trip, because there are people that I definitely, if I was putting together a group trip, wouldn't have had on my trip because I didn't know them before, but also just because of maybe the way they travel. And I've gotten to travel with them and taken some of the tips, tricks, and some of the experiences that they have and the way that they're traveling. And for example, Karen comes to mind. She's great. Like, she didn't ski, right? And she came on a ski trip. She was awesome. I don't usually I got to hang out with her and got to bond with her when typically I probably wouldn't be going on a group trip with her if we were segmenting ourselves out by age or what type of stuff we really liked, hobbies or things like that. But I really loved getting to spend time with her, and it was a super fun experience. So I like that, where you have these people that might not have come together some other way.
Absolutely. And now we have some new friends and some online friends we met in person for the first time and that sort of thing. And that's always a wonderful thing. Number 2, saving money, of course. Costs. We're going to talk about the chalet, for example, getting to rent that because we filled it up with, I think it might have slept one or two more, but for the most part, we filled it up. This lovely sort of chalet, ski themed, like had a big long table where we'd have these communal dinners. You can't fill that up with 5 people. So when you get a group together, you have more buying power, you have the ability to negotiate discounts, you have, it's just more affordability. I could leave it at that. We could go on and on, but if done right, and again, we can be saying, we're not saying necessarily, we're not just talking about group trips that you would go and pay for from a tour operator or something like this. We put this together independently. So you as the organizer can put together your own trip with your group of friends of 10 people or whatever, and use that as leverage to get better costs, better pricing. And it's a perk, I'd say. It can be a perk. Of course, like tour operators will mark things up and it could be a lot more expensive than if you did it independently. And that can generally be the case, but saving money can also be a perk if you're doing it. Say you're doing a group trip independently, let's say.
And one of the things I just think, I think the trade-off with cost is because again, no type of travel is perfect and it's all right at different times. I think, and I think you're right. You can get it can be much cheaper. I think the biggest trade-off when it comes to cost is then the consideration of how you might travel versus someone else, right? So, for example, maybe you're the type of person who would say, all right, well, I don't want to do everything as cheap as possible. I would have spent an extra $20 or $40, right, a night for this type of accommodation, but we're with this group. So, again, it's not a good or bad thing. I think that's the maybe sometimes tough balance when you're doing stuff in groups, is the autonomy for that type of thing, right? Is like you have to make sure your expectations or what you want is aligned with what the group wants, because when you're an independent traveler, you can always change it usually, right? Like, I don't know. I want a cheaper place. I'm here. I want a cheaper place. I'm going to go get a cheap place. Or I'm here. I want a more expensive place. I'm going to go to a more expensive place. So I'm with you. You can save a lot of money and I think it's great. But that would be the one little thing that I would tell people before you're going on a trip. Make sure you're talking to whoever's running the trip, or if you're running the trip, make sure you're talking to the people coming of like, here's the type of place we're going to be, or the type of things we're going to do. Here are the costs. And, because I could see some people, not in our group, like it was great because everyone had those expectations, but I could see that being a little bit of a sticky point, right, at times. And that would be my biggest concern if I was running a group, was like, what are people's expectations around, especially around accommodations? That's usually the big one, or like how we're traveling in between places. Everyone cool with a shuttle bus, or like an overnight train or whatever. Just those kind of things would be something to consider if you're putting together a trip or if you're looking to join a trip.
Yeah, it's a great point. I remember in the letter I referenced earlier that Tim sent out, one of the things he said was no divas, please. And, that's only 3 words, or I think it just said no divas. I don't even think there was a please. But, in those 2 words, it kind of says a lot, right? It's like, hey, this isn't going to be, some kind of luxury trip. We're going to be staying in, we're going to be taking shuttle buses. We're going to be doing public buses, this, that, and the other. So you're right, though. I think setting those expectations is key. We'll get to our number 1, sharing, right? Sharing food, sharing memories, the camaraderie, sharing laughs, sharing perspectives with each other. Got to be number 1.
For me, it is. I mean, this comes to the new friendships thing. I mean, I guess new friendships means people we didn't know before. For me, I loved this trip in particular because about 50% of the people I already knew and had strong relationships with. So I got to, further those relationships and got to see those people. And about 50% of the people I didn't know. And I, being an extrovert and being someone who's curious, and as you are too, that's why you have a podcast. That's why you interview all these people. Is like, you want to hear about people. You want to hear their story. You want to know about them. To me, this was the perfect mix of that, where I could sit there and be like, I'm so excited to see Jason again. We haven't hung out for a while. We're going to get to be in person. We're going to get to ski, but I'm also going to get to chat with these other people who I've never met and like satiate that part of me too, that curiosity of wanting to make new friendships. And we all know that stuff happens over travel quicker, right, Jay? Like, I mean, when you have these shared experiences, especially when you're in different cultures and most of you haven't been there and you're all experienced this something for the first time, it's it can bond you really, really quick, and you have a lot to talk about. And there's a lot of stuff that afterwards you feel a kinship with, right? And so to me, that is by far the biggest benefit of group travel is the relationships that are formed that then happen there, but then feasibly are ongoing as well because you've done something for the first time together and you have that commonality to harken back to then deepen the relationships hopefully in the future.
Love it. Speaking of coming together with a group, sharing and all that good stuff, you want to tell people what's going on at Camp Indy this year?
Yeah, I mean, running an event, you and Tim didn't seem that stressed out with this Bulgaria trip. You admittedly had said like, well, Tim just put it together. So Tim is really laid back and chill. And but that being said, running an event, running a trip is never easy, right? It just, there's work that goes into it, no matter how much you've done it before or how good the people are on the ground that are helping you out or any of that. And so I just have a deep appreciation for anyone who says, I'm going to do this, right? I know it's not going to be easy. I know it's going to be a pain. I know it can be stressful, but I'm going to do it. And you and I have a lot of, our relationship we have to thank because of a conference that we went to called the World Domination Summit. And people who are listening to this who know you and I we've talked about it a lot. But in 2013, I went to a conference that I had never been to. You had been to a few years before. And we met there. And because a guy named Chris Gillibo took on the initiative to put on a conference and to put on an event, it changed my life because we met and we did businesses together and we started podcasts together and our families became friends together. And so when I think of the most important things that have happened in my life, it comes from events. It comes from either conferences that people have put on, travel experiences I've had with groups. And we decided, you and I, way back, Jay, before the pandemic in 2018, I think we started planning this, that we wanted to give people a similar experience. We wanted, if someone was sitting there and they were an entrepreneur or a wantrepreneur or a digital nomad or someone or a creative who was like, I can't do this 9 to 5. I can't live this regular life. I don't want to, but I don't know people in my real life who are trying to break free and live life on their own terms. We wanted to give them a space to meet other people and to learn how to do that. And we wanted to do it in person because all of you can listen to Jay's podcast. You can listen to my podcast. You can listen to Location Neat podcast. That's great. That's incredible information, but we know the real connections happen when you're in person. And so in 2018, we decided we want to do that, but we were also decided, and Jay, you could hop in here. This is your story as well, that it couldn't be in a boring conference room. If we're teaching people to break free of their regular life and be unconventional and kind of live their most fulfilled life and travel more, doing that in a regular conference room didn't feel right. So we decided to do it at an adult summer camp.
Yeah, it's a great place. I know you're hosting it at the same camp. I wish I could be there. My mom is actually going to be visiting from the States in Norway to see her grandchildren. So the reason why I can't come, but otherwise I would be there because it's an awesome camp setting, lovely lake, so many awesome activities. You got like high ropes course, climbing, just super cool people. And I hadn't had that magical feeling from a conference since like the early WDS conferences that you referenced. So it was an honor to facilitate that and to be a part of it. It's, cool to see that you're keeping it going and people can check it out. Of course, we'll leave the link in the show notes. It's campindy.com, but it's less than 2 hours from New York City. Pretty easy to get to. And it's June 16th to the 19th. So come one, come all. Unconventional minds wanted. I see you have on the website. So there you go.
Yeah. I mean, that says it all, man. It's like we're doing an adult summer camping conference for people who are nomads, who are entrepreneurs, who are adventure seekers, who are travelers. And the part about this, Jay, as we kind of touched on when we talked about group travel, is whether you're just starting out on this path, right? Whether you're listening to this podcast, you're like, man, I'm stuck in this regular job in this 9 to 5 and I want to get out and I don't know how to do it. Or you're someone who's like, hey, I've been able to get out and I want to surround myself with other people who inspire and motivate me, who are living this lifestyle as well. No matter where you are on that spectrum, where you are on that path, whether you want to get out or you've gotten out, this is why we created camp, for all these people to come together and see that it is possible to continue to figure out what it is you want in life and then to go and achieve that, because there's going to be people who have been doing it longer, who have been doing it, who have traveled more, right? Whose businesses are bigger, right? But they all started out having those same doubts, fears, concerns of, I'm doing something a little different. And maybe not a lot of people in my regular life get it or are doing it. Come to camp. You'll be surrounded by like-minded folks. You get to water ski. You'll get to do karaoke if you want. Although without Jay there rapping this year, I don't know. Someone else is going to have to come and hold down the mic. But 90s dance parties, just a whole lot of fun. And the biggest thing is, unlike other conferences, Jay, and this is why we created it this way, right, is that you don't just go and listen and just take it in, right? I'm going to sit here and someone's going to speak. I'm going to take it in. Like, this is an experience. Right? You're going to get to be around these people. You're going to get to have s'mores with these people. You're going to get to do yoga and meditation with these people if you want. You're really going to get to have an experience that ties it all together, that gives you something to move forward with versus just a learning experience that you might have at a typical conference. It's much more than that.
Cool. Well, check it out. Trav, it was so fun to do this again. It had been too long. I mean, of course, we've been talking and hanging out in Bulgaria, but to get on the mics and record a pod again, what a blast. So thanks for taking the time to do it, man. I appreciate it. It was fun to talk about the trip and to kind of relive it too.
Yeah, thank you for putting the trip together. It's always my pleasure. It's great to be back on the mic with you. You just give me a time and place. I'll always come back here, man.
Thanks, buddy. We'll chat soon. Thank you once again to Travis Sherry for not only taking the time to come on the pod and recap our trip, but also for all those snacks he brought me. Thanks again, Trav, if you're listening. And also thanks for the hookup, because Trav is giving you $150 off Camp Indy with the promo code ZERO, Z-E-R-O, if you go to campindy.com and you order a ticket. ZERO is the promo code that'll give you $150 off, exclusive to Zero to Travel podcast listeners. So there you go. Thanks again to Trav. Now, I want to leave you with a great quote to tie up this episode. But first, that one thing you should do if you're traveling with a big group and you're in charge of the itinerary, you're planning the trip, you're the one sort of leading the charge and creating the experience. I think this goes for most any experience. I would say the number one thing to do is make sure, well, I could say two things. I'll put this one at the top. One is make sure that you build in enough free time for people to chill out, have time for themselves, do things, unstructured time. I think that gets underutilized sometimes when people are planning events or trips or anything like this. Got to give people some free time to break loose and do their own thing. That is my number one tip for planning an experience. Do that and you'll be good. And of course, I think good food. Anytime you have great food, if you make sure you have good food, everybody will be happy. The quickest way to a trip attendee's heart is through their stomach or something like that, right? So there you go. A couple things to leave you with. And if you haven't gotten in touch, I do want to invite you to do so. Please drop me a voicemail. Let me know what's up. You can find the link to that voicemail box in the show notes. Very easy to do. And sign up for the newsletter. If you haven't done so, zerototravel.com/newsletter goes out every week. Try to give you some helpful stuff. Okay, let me leave you with this quote to wrap up the episode from Amy Poehler, the wonderful comedian, who said this, and I think this says it all. Find a group of people who challenge and inspire you. Spend a lot of time with them, and it will change your life. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of this listening community. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Cheers and peace and love to you and yours. Thanks again.
This podcast has been brought to you by Zero